program, Debbie Taylor and Pat Long, who are going to tell us about the services available to all Bucks County residents through the Ombudsman program and the rights of all residents who reside in long-term care facilities. Let's review a few housekeeping matters. Number one, you have all been muted upon entry into today's presentation. Please keep your computer muted throughout the duration of the presentation. Please also keep your cameras off to ensure the best technical experience for all those participating. We welcome your questions. Please utilize the chat function to enter any questions you have throughout the presentation. We will stop to address your questions at 2 different times in the course of this presentation. The chat box is located at the lower end of your screen. If you hover your cursor over the bottom middle of your screen, there should be a cartoon bubble that pops up. And if you click on that, you'll be able to type your question into the chat box. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted to the agency's website at www.buckscounty.org/aging. It will be posted on October 20th, and that was www.buckscounty.org/aging. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, we will have an evaluation sent to you through email. We ask that you please complete the evaluation so that we can continue to improve our efforts to provide you with good information. Okay, without further ado, Debbie and Pat, take it away.
Yes, hello. As Lisa said, my name is Debbie and I'm here with Pat, and we are ombudsman. What did you say? Omzibusman? Well, let's start with the word, ombudsman. How do you say it? What does it mean? Where on earth did the word come from? Well, it's a Swedish word that simply means advocate or citizen's representative. I'd like to think that if the late, great Johnny Cash wrote a song for us, it might be entitled, I'm, O-M, your bud, B-U-D, man. I'm your bud, man. Just like ombudsman. I know, that's very corny. I apologize. But at least now you know how to say it, because over half the folks we meet at least stumble over the word. So in a nutshell, the Ombudsman program works to resolve complaints and issues on behalf of individuals residing in long-term care settings, such as nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and personal care homes. Ombudsmen empower residents by educating them on their rights. Ombudsmen advocate for those who are unable to advocate for themselves to ensure that all residents receive the highest quality of care and quality of life. The program also works to bring about changes at the state and national levels that will improve care conditions for residents. Even though the ombudsman can and on occasion do assist those seniors in the community, our primary emphasis is on those in long-term care settings. So how we came to be. The Older Americans Act of 1965, as it evolved and was amended, required that each state have an ombudsman program, and that occurred in 1978. The Pennsylvania Department of Aging houses the State Ombudsman Office, which is in Harrisburg. The Pennsylvania Department of Aging contracts with the 52 Area Agency on Aging, and those 52 Area Agencies on Aging cover all 67 counties in Pennsylvania.
So let's unpack that nutshell a bit. Who are ombudsmen and what do they do? We'll start with the Ombudsman vision statement. Advocate for those who can't, support those who can, and ensure that all long-term residents live with dignity and respect. We would all agree that residents deserve dignity, respect, support, and advocacy. But do you think that just happens? No. So how do we as ombudsmen help make that happen? First, by who we are. We are specifically trained advocates who are resident-directed and resident-centered, assisting residents in facility-based settings. We do so in a confidential manner, all the while encouraging self-advocacy and self-resolution. We are federally mandated, legally based, and state certified via standardized training. We champion the right of those residents to achieve the highest possible quality of life and quality of care. We are united through an impassioned commitment to listen, educate, investigate, mediate, and empower through a visible presence in long-term care settings. So resident direction is at the heart of the Pennsylvania Ombudsman Program. We use a simple phrase that we think best captures this idea, and that is nothing about the resident without the resident. Any communal living arrangement can be challenging, and it's very easy for an individual to get lost in the majority rules, or for those who are care dependent to get left behind. Residents should not get swept away in the fast-moving current of the hustle and bustle of the current healthcare system. They need to certainly remain the captain of their ship, and we as ombudsmen are constantly standing with residents to push against this tide. Confidentiality. In order for us to be trusted and effective advocates, we must be very cautious not to compromise the resident's right to confidentiality. Sharing resident-specific information without authorization of the resident would jeopardize their ability to feel comfortable in their home. As ombudsman, we will not disclose any resident-specific information without the consent of the resident or their power of attorney. Even when a resident sign a consent for ombudsman to act on their behalf, they may choose to not have their identity revealed to the facility. The ombudsman work at the direction of the resident or their power of attorney and must obtain consent for any action taken. As ombudsman, we are bound by law to protect the privacy of those we serve. Our work with residents has revealed that there is a significant fear of retaliation experienced by most long-term care residents. Residents are very sensitive to their dependence on facility staff for basic care, and they fear that bringing forth complaints may have a negative consequence. The ombudsmen are federally mandated through the Older Americans Act of 1965 and legally based, requiring that residents have regular and timely access to the local ombudsman. Ombudsmen have access to all long-term care facilities and their residents and their medical records, but only with the residents' consent. As ombudsmen, we champion for residents' quality of care and quality of life. Individualized care is the right of every nursing home resident. The Nursing Home Reform Law of 1987 required that residents receive services and activities to attain or maintain the highest practicable physical, mental, psychosocial well-being of each resident in accordance with a written plan of care. Quality of care means what care is provided. The law also requires nursing facilities to care for its residents in such a manner and in such an environment as will promote maintenance or enhancement of the quality of life of each resident. An emphasis is placed on dignity, choice, and self-determination for residents. Quality of life means then how that care is provided. The law requires nursing facilities to provide quality of care in a way that supports quality of life for each resident. When facilities do this, they achieve individualized care for each resident. Living in a skilled nursing facility presents many challenges for some residents. There are many different types of staff providing care and services in a facility. Coordinating those services in a way that reflects the residents' personal goals and preferences is often difficult for both residents and advocates. The care plan process is a wonderful tool for addressing issues and achieving resolution of concerns. The process brings all modalities together with the resident, and a constructive dialogue can be had regarding the issues. As always, our first goal as Ombudsman is to assist the resident in self-advocacy and self-resolution. The Ombudsman remains the resident advocate. One of our primary roles is to educate residents about the purpose of the care plan and their right to participate in that process. Often we find residents are unaware that this document even exists, and that this document drives their care. By empowering a resident to participate in the care plan process, the resident now has a consistent vehicle for impacting routine and approach, resulting in a resident-directed plan of care. Because the process can be a little complex and perceived as overwhelming, residents may ask an ombudsman to attend the care plan meeting with them. The Ombudsman wants to educate the community about the Ombudsman program and/or resident rights and the role of the Ombudsman in long-term care. Community education is a required activity of every local Ombudsman program. It serves to establish and maintain our visible presence in the community, as well as connects us to potential residents, families and friends of residents, and potential volunteers.
So in closing this part one, let me bring attention to some distinctions of the Ombudsman program. What the Ombudsman program is not, we are not a licensing or regulatory agency that performs inspections, but we are very familiar with those regulations to best advocate for residents. We are not protective services or older adult protective services, but we do provide information about these services and when to refer to them. We are not direct care providers, but we are a resource for staff training, especially on resident rights. So we've given you quite a bit of information to digest. So let's stop a minute and see what questions you may have about the role of the Ombudsman.
Thank you, Debbie and Pat. Let me check the chat and see if we have any questions at this time. We do not have any questions at this time. So why don't we continue on and discuss empowering residents through residents' rights? And please, folks, feel free to put those questions in the chat, and we will stop again for questions at the end of this portion.
Okay, empowering residents through resident rights. How many of you remember what was going on in 1979? I'm afraid I do. I had graduated high school, so I know Jimmy Carter was the president. Gasoline was 86 cents a gallon. And the favorite TV shows were Dukes of Hazzard, Dallas, Three's Company, and nursing home residents had no rights. Nursing homes hired aides that had no experience or formal training. Restraints, both physical and medicinal, could be commonly used to manage challenging behaviors. No protection from discharges. In the past, a resident could be put out of the home with little or no notice, and with no additional plans for safety or the provision of care needs. Nursing homes were thought of as rest homes or God's waiting room. Continued reform was needed. So, how did reform affect residents today? In 1980, Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act was passed. And in 1987, Nursing Home Reform Act, also known as OBRA, was passed. This was the first time that the Residents' Bill of Rights appeared. These acts required nursing homes to ensure that residents had a high quality of life, good physical and mental activities, and were able to participate in the administration of the home. In 2010, federal regulations required the resident rights to include dignity and privacy and freedom from discrimination and restraints, the right to be informed, the right to refuse treatment. In 2017, federal regulations put some mechanisms in place for its surveyors aimed at enforcing person-centered care. Also, a formal grievance process for residents and families was required. So, what exactly are the rights and what do they mean for our residents? Well, number one, right to a dignified existence. Everyone wants to be treated with consideration, kindness, respect, to be listened to be recognized as an individual, to live in a home-like setting where their personal belongings are safe, and to be free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Number two, right to self-determination. Who wouldn't want to make their own choices about their schedule, routine, or to designate a person, maybe a family member or friend, to also be informed about their life and care? To be afforded reasonable accommodations for how they prefer to have their needs met. To request or refuse or discontinue treatment. To have the right to make their own decisions, even if others think they are bad decisions. Number three, right to be fully informed. Residents want to know and be a part of the decisions about their care and their medical treatment. They want to know what their rights are and how they can exercise them. They want to know about the policies of the home. If a room change is necessary, they should be given notice and know why and with whom. Again, remember our phrase, nothing about the resident without the resident. No decisions should be made, medical or otherwise, without informing and engaging the resident. Number four, the right to raise grievances. Residents can now submit a grievance in writing. Perhaps someone at the home could help them, and receive back in writing the response or resolve of that grievance. Also, residents can contact the ombudsman or licensing agency to file a complaint. Either way, a resident should always feel comfortable contacting the ombudsman office or licensing bureau without fearing retaliation. Number five, right to access. Access to visitors at any time. Access to their medical records or their designee to those records. Access to assistance if sensory impairments exist. To participate in social, religious, and community activities. Number six, rights regarding financial affairs. If residents wish to manage their own financial affairs, they can do so. Residents should be informed of charges, to receive regular statements of the personal needs account, and reasonable access to this account. Number 7, right to privacy. Can you imagine if you could not go anywhere just to be alone for a minute? We all want at times to have solace or refuge, just to be quiet. And of course, privacy during care. You don't want to feel like the whole world knows everything about you. Walking into a resident's room is really like entering their private home or space. Stop and ask yourself, how would you want your neighbor to enter your home? And number 8, rights during discharge and transfer. When a resident is discharged or released from a facility setting, he or she has the right to a safe discharge. This means the place they are going to is a safe environment where each of their care needs can be met. Sometimes a discharge to another place is desirable to the resident. Sometimes it's not. There are only a few reasons a facility can discharge a resident involuntarily. In these cases, the resident still has rights. For example, the resident has the right to a 30-day written notice for the plan to discharge. The resident can choose to appeal that notice. No matter the reason for the discharge, all discharges must be safe and planned. Also, the facility must provide the resident with a notice of the right to return to the facility after a hospitalization or a therapeutic leave. So those are the 8 general themes in summary form of resident rights. Facilities are required to have a signed copy that residents have been informed of their rights, and also a procedure in place to review these rights with a resident at least annually. Next, we'll have you watch excerpts of a video of residents talking about what's important to them regarding the care they receive. Perhaps you may hear the underlying theme in their statements.
I am an adult. I do not have a bedtime, and I can make my own decisions.
We are not living in your workplace.
You are working in our home.
Introduce yourself to me. Would you want a stranger bathing you?
Appreciate that you have dedicated your life to improving ours.
Let's avoid conflict with clear mutual communication.
Your extra effort and kindness, or lack thereof, can make or break my day.
So, what do you think the residents were really saying? These were just 6 of 26 statements that were included in the entire video. I propose to you that all the statements the residents made had more to do with dignity and respect than anything else. They were saying, treat me like the adult that I am. I would like to be heard and understood. Persons entering my room should identify themselves and explain why they are there, no matter how often I may forget. And please don't let me leave my room without my hair combed or my lipstick on. Dignity and respect can be found in the way staff provide care to residents. Being care dependent, residents are more aware of how they are cared for. Residents should be made to feel that they are valued. Do staff consider their wishes and feelings? Are they listened to? Are their preferences and choices respected? Dignity and respect are at the heart of resident rights, and that is why resident rights empower residents.
Thank you again, Debbie. That was a great overview of the rights that residents have in long-term care facilities. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to check the chat now and see if we have any questions for you and for Pat. I don't see any questions at this time. I want to give people a few more minutes to type them in. And also, if you're not familiar with the chat function and you would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute your microphone at this time. I want to remind everyone that this presentation will be available on the agency website at www.buckscounty.org/aging, starting on October the 20th. And also, if you would like to contact the Bucks County Ombudsman Program, their telephone number is posted here at 267-880-5716. And we also have provided the toll-free number to report allegations of abuse at 1-800-243-3767. We do have a question for you ladies. The question is, are residents of assisted living facilities afforded the same rights as nursing home residents?
I'll jump in, Pat, and you can fill in. Essentially, yes. There are some minor changes, nuances, if you will, in rights for personal care residents and rights for assisted living residents, maybe unique to their setting. But what I just shared are, again, the general overall rights that are included in all long-term care settings.
No, and I agree, Deb. The emphasis is certainly on dignity and respect, the availability of a formal grievance process. And I think one of the things that's really important, whether it's long-term care or whether it's personal care, is that those rights are reviewed with the residents at least annually, so that there can be some communication around what the rights really mean to the resident.
Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have another question. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but I'm just going to read it to you ladies and maybe it will make more sense for you. The power of attorney right to information. Reconcile conflicting information from staff versus management, ratio of staff to residents. It may be, if you need clarifications, maybe mention what would help you to answer that.
Well, let me jump in with just that general theme of power of attorney and residents. I like to remind the facilities that they need to always ask the resident how they feel about a particular issue. Did they want a visitor? Did they, not want to take a medication? And this is where it gets tricky. If the resident is clear and understanding of the question and the ramifications, the resident's voice should be listened to and heeded, even if the power of attorney feels otherwise. Power of attorney never takes your voice away. It merely enables someone else to speak for you if in case you can't. So facilities often like to, for ease sake, talk to powers of attorney without checking with the resident. So I'm not sure if that's helpful to your question. The second part of your question with ratio and staff, that's a very difficult one to ask. To answer. And I'm going to put Pat on the spot and see if she can come up with something better than what I would say.
Well, I think it's difficult because a lot of times we hear from residents and families, there's not enough staff. And many times the facilities are, as we know, are staffing according to the regulations and the requirements of the regulations. So our hope coming out of this, or coming through, I guess, this pandemic, is that the light will finally shine on the fact that the regulations really do not speak to what the needs of the residents are. Once the families were removed from that caregiving process, it really showed us that the staffing ratios do need to be looked at, and they do need to be looked at very carefully. I think that when we, as ombudsman, when we look forward, we say that the ombudsman, the facilities are staffing according to the regulations, and that's where the rub, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
And if that was your question and the answer these ladies have provided hasn't fully answered it, please feel free. We're a relatively small group today to unmute your microphone and clarify for us what it is that you want to know. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. And of course, people can always get a hold of you and your team, ladies, by calling that 267-880-5716 number. Is that right?
That is correct.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. And I'm glad to know that we have this resource for older adults here in Bucks County. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.